Buenas tardes. Prosiguiendo con las actividades programadas, a continuación se llevará a cabo una conferencia en inglés. Se le enfatiza a la audiencia, conforme vayan surgiendo preguntas o comentarios, se les solicita que vayan compartiendo con antelación en el panel del chat, repitiendo sus dudas y preguntas. La siguiente conferencia lleva por nombre Balance Reflections of a Youth Adult Partnership, por la doctora Taryn Price.
Doctora Taryn Price, doctora en Administración de Actividades Recreativas y Deporte en Middle Tennessee State University, certificada como profesional en el manejo de proyectos y gestión del cambio organizacional. En su experiencia profesional, cuenta con la administración de proyectos en sistemas de salud con el diseño de estrategias innovadoras, entrenamiento en sistemas de aprendizaje síncronos y asíncronos, evaluación para acreditaciones con estándares gubernamentales, desarrollo de medidas de bienestar para fomentar el balance vida-trabajo en empleados, entre otros. También participó en servicios a la comunidad, como United Way of Greater Houston y Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Inc. Ha publicado 12 artículos, revisados por pares, y realizado más de 20 conferencias e invitaciones en distintos eventos. Actualmente se desempeña como profesor asistente de gestión recreativa en Oklahoma State University. Doctora Taryn Price, bienvenida.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining in on this session. If you'll give me a second, I'm going to share my screen. All right, to start this conversation, I was really hoping to understand who is actually in the room today. So, in the chat, can you go on and share who is in the room right now? And I'll be looking at that. Welcome in, Maria. Good afternoon. Welcome in, Lizbeth. And can you also share while you're telling me who is in the room, can you share what program you're in or what organization you're currently working with right now? Welcome in, Sophia, Miguel, Renata. Can you also share what organization or program you're in? Hi, Paul. Okay. So I see psychology student. Thank you for that. Psychology. Keep them coming, please. Okay, okay. And I'll wait on one more and then get the show on the road. All right. Okay, good. I just wanted to understand who all is in the room as I'm going through this presentation, but I'll hop back in and get us started. So again, my name is Dr. Taryn Price, and today I wanted to talk about a former project that I worked on called Balance, or that I'm titling today Balance Reflections of a Youth Adult Partnership. And so some of the I do have a few questions. the regarding youth development, and I want to get us in the mind frame because as we're thinking about ourselves as psychologists, as members of organizations that are working on connecting with people, developing people, we know that everyone pretty much everyone does go through that lifespan from childhood to youth into adulthood. And one strong premise that takes place throughout that entire time is development. And so, my question is, when you think of the word youth or the concept of youth, what are you thinking about? Or you can answer any one of these questions of who are youth? What is youth development? And how does youth development occur? If you click on the cup, am I not sharing my screen the right way? Doctor, please can you share full screen? Okay, let me figure this out. Okay, I'm hoping that I'm doing it right. Who are youth? What is youth development and how does youth development occur? And actually, I'm going to pause and see if there's any chance that I can connect to my second screen. I Now I see exactly why you said that. One moment. Well, I only have to go into this smaller screen just for these 1, 2 slides. So I'll just repeat and then I'll make sure I blow it up for everyone. What is youth development? Who are youth? What are you thinking about when you're saying, I am focused on youth development or I'm supporting someone in their development? Can you put that in the chat? What does that mean, whether you're thinking about youth or adults? Is a mix okay? Thank you, Teresa. I believe youth development is a mix of experience, family background, and physical development. Absolutely. Is composed of external and internal factors for sure. We are definitely molded, so to speak, by some things that occur outside of our home, inside of our home. External, internal could mean so much. Interacting with our elders, I love that. And even defining who are our elders. Is it anyone that's older than you? Could it be someone your same age? Could elders mean 2 years older, 5 years older? Thank you so much for that. So I'm going to share my screen more largely now. All right. So exactly as you all were already mentioning, who are youth? When we think about youth, more often they're defined by a certain age bracket. And depending upon what article you're reading, youth could be anywhere from um, 12 or 10 or 12, all the way up to 18. And then once someone hits that 18 mark, automatically they're an adult, and they're supposed to do everything that an adult is supposed to be ready for and be prepared for that. And so all of that development that took place, the growth opportunities, the family, internal, external factors that you all mentioned that are occurring during youth enhance their development, enhance the way that they think, and also the way that they're entering into organizations, their way that they're entering into relationships, into their families. And so how does youth development occur? It happens all over the place where youth are constantly being impacted by all types of decisions, experiences, as someone mentioned, everything. They're taking feedback and they're interpreting that to make sense in whatever way that makes sense to them at the time. Now, I'm going to switch just slightly and change that question to who are adults? What is adult development, and how does adult development occur? So who are adults? Again, when we think about what research will show or depict, it's based on an age frame of at that 18-year-old mark and beyond, they're considered an adult. And then maybe someone will break that down by young adult to middle-aged adult, and then someone even put elderly. And so we think about the amount of development that even may take place at each one of those ranges. And when then we start questioning, okay, we know there's a lot of documentation on youth development and the ways that we need to engage youth for their own development and what is positive. Then still a large looming question about what does adult development look like, because we do know that it differs from youth. There are different needs now. There are new experiences that allow them to be a little bit more matured in their thinking, their sharpened critical thinking skills in some cases as well. And so we think about this continuum of childhood to adulthood, where a development is being observed throughout this entire time in different ways and in different instances. And so this occurs within their family in the same places with as a youth, but it is interpreted completely different. And the stakes, so to speak, are a little bit higher. Today, I'd like to talk to you, first, give you an introduction over a few key concepts of development in general. And so, as I'm thinking about the theme of this conference of I think it's trends in organizational development, then, or trends in organizational change. Let me double check that. You understand what I am talking about. There's so many thoughts going through my mind. I'm excited about this. But introduction, I would like to talk about voice. What is voice? And thinking about that within our organizations, youth adult partnership. So that's what YAP stands for. And so this is going to be the fun part of imagining what is a new way that youth adult partnerships could be introduced into our organizations for the development of all. And so I'll get to that a little bit later. But I'm basing this presentation off of a project that I conducted a few years ago, where I partnered youth and adults together, and they went through a project. I collected some data, and then I'll be sharing that data with you, as well as opportunities, implications for what that could mean for you in your future considerations and research interests. I know I saw a master's student as well. So today, youth, adults, and positive youth development. Someone already mentioned that when we're thinking about youth, we know that they're going to have some type of interaction with adults. An adult brought them into this world. And so they're constantly being molded. They're being exposed to new experiences and making sense of that, interpreting what it means for them. And we're hoping that through those interactions, because they're in such a sensitive state, they're being influenced by so many different stimuli constantly, that we're hoping that at the conclusion of all of those interactions, those experiences, those mental processes, that they're experiencing positive youth development. And so that's what that PYD stands for. We know that there is a strong implication, correlation between the interaction between youth and adults that's being facilitated, interpreted to ultimately create this positive youth development. This could be from attending a play. This could be from having a sensitive conversation simply about how you feel and being in a safe place to share that. This could come from me. My background is within recreation and the sport industry. And so my goal was to create these recreational sporting influences or interactions that allowed them to express themselves, compete in a healthy manner, and ultimately experience positive youth development in their own unique ways. Because positive youth development can simply mean they feel joy, they're being challenged in a healthy manner that may positive youth development doesn't mean that there isn't conflict, isn't contention, but that they're better able to handle that as they move forward, which we know is a requirement in adulthood. And so we're trying to expose and put allow children to have these unique experiences, challenge them in a healthy way that is age specific according to their development by adults, that ultimately allows and leans for them to have positive youth development, because as children grow up, they become adults. And so when we think about the positive development that they experienced as youth, the more likely they are to continue to emerge and grow as an adult, and then the cycle continues as adults then may have choose to have families or support someone else in their family. A lot of the programs that are created to support positive youth development, they're called youth led, youth driven, youth centered. And so when you see maybe a parent that's trying to engage their child in some activity, they'll have on maybe on a pamphlet, a description, a flyer that documents this program is youth driven, meaning we want to focus on your child, and every activity is centered around their own development and that is age specific. And sometimes you'll see an activity that is considered youth led to what we'll talk about later is having a little bit of agency. So they're kind of I'm thinking about children that may go to the park without a parent. They're nearby home, and so they're simply going to the park, and they create teams, and they participate in football. They participate in volleyball, which is my favorite sport. And so they're beginning to kind of control the experience, a youth led engagement on their own. And so there's something really to be said about even a small experience like that, that allows for the maturation, the positive youth development that they may experience later in life. Now, this is something that every organization is talking about all the time. It's one of the main premises of even a higher education, of why it was built. They want to develop leaders. They want to allow leaders, and we can break down leaders, and we're not going to do that today necessarily, but what makes a good leader? And while there is no definite definition of what a leader must entail, because it is so nuanced. It definitely ranges based on the situation. But a few things that we do know that are core to a leader is having a sense of agency and voice. Now, I'm going to stop there and check my other screen just to see if there are any comments. So give me a moment. Absolutely. I'm looking at its kind of growth. It can happen in different ways. Okay. So I'll double check and I'll come back and forth between my screens just to see if there are any comments. So don't hesitate to ask me a question, as I may just have to get to it a little bit later, but thanks for sticking with me. So, back to the core of leadership. And this I know that sometimes when people hear leadership, they're like, another leadership training. Here we go. They want to talk about the ways to be a better leader. And you may feel like you're already a great leader. And so, but when you do have that mindset, or when you are in that position, this is where I challenge you. How are you developing someone else? In what ways are you already displaying leadership skills, and you feel like you are a strong leader? How are you also connecting with that next person to build them up? That is where we really enter into leadership. So with agency, it's this sense of knowing you have power, you have voice. I mean, I'm sorry, not to say voice. You have power, you have a clear train of thought that on an issue that is intellectual, that is open to other ideas, but you are firm in having a grasp and contributing to a conversation. That to me is what agency is. It's this level of confidence where you can enter into almost any conversation, even if you don't know everything that's going to be discussed. There are things that you could contribute to and make others think, huh, that was a good thought. Or, huh, I didn't think of it that way. To me, that is the sense of agency where we most often see that when someone is confident. They enter into a situation very confidently. They may not know all the right decisions, they may not have all the information, but they will still speak from a reasonable stance. That is agency. Voice is when someone does speak up. They may take in all the information. They may not be the first person to speak. They don't have to give you a full lecture as I'm going to be doing today, but they don't feel the need to make sure that they're the only voice that's heard in the room, but they do speak up. And every time they do speak up, because of their sense of agency, their confidence in their past experiences, their exposure, their willingness to be open to new ideas, they're ready to speak up. They're ready to also challenge others to speak up, especially when they know that they have a strength that could be added to the conversation. So, agency and voice are central to the impact or the ways that leaders are developed, whether we're talking about at youth level or in adulthood. And so when we recognize that these two principles are necessary for the development, the engagement of youth and adults, we then think about the ways that we can create programming, the way that we engage them, the way that we challenge them, the way that we begin to look at their areas of weakness, that and then begin to mold them for strengths, or to be viewed as opportunities for a strength. And so this is where I want you to be thinking about within your programming, thinking about your psychology impact for youth and adults, and thinking about ways that you're driving those programs to support them in their development. And the research that's been conducted for youth, because again, youth grow up into to become adults, and then they enter into your organizations. They're establishing families, and so you want to make sure that they have a strong foundation early on as possible. Even though in adulthood these things can still be garnered, nurtured, created, you want to, if possible, starting them off and giving them opportunities at an early age is key. And so for voice, a lot of researchers have noted that voice is developed with community and civic engagement. So it's no surprise, like even in adults, for adults, as they're entering into college and they have that question on the application, that college application, of how many community service hours did you have? What did you do outside of school? This is where that sense of voice, those pre-indicators for what a leader, the qualities of a leader may already be in the works for, that you're now either able to see where you can better yourself and contribute to your own community development and personal development. With research opportunities, they've looked at the way that youth have participated in community and civic engagement through by increasing health initiatives. So putting together so it could be as simple as putting together a pamphlet, or a group of students, thinking about your class assignment, from middle school, from high school, putting together this assignment and then passing those flyers out, or putting together a program. It could even be the talent show, putting together a talent show to bring people together, and recognizing that your voice and putting this event together supports your voice development, that then translate into your adult development as well. But increasing health initiatives, policy development. So you'll see a lot of times where your city leaders may put a call out to for interns, and they're asking them to serve alongside their legislators, and putting together policies of what impacts your community. And so as our our civic leaders partner with youth in some cases, they'll ask them, what do you think? And that then requires a sense of agency, this sense of confidence, and also this value in knowing that your voice was heard, then is pushed forward into creating a policy. And so that is one, these are some of the ways that we've seen voice being developed as a core component for positive youth development, because youth turn into adults. And we want to recognize that along this leadership continuum, what are ways that we're supporting them in their development, no matter what the age? For me, what was so interesting was coming across this research idea. And I remember attending a conference, I think it was the NRPA conference, National Recreation Parks Association. And I attended this research session over this concept right here, youth adult partnerships. And I can definitely tell you that I went into that session with not as open of a mind as I probably should have, because I'm thinking youth adult partnerships, you want youth and adult to work together for anything in the word democratic means we are equal. My voice should be heard in the same way that your voice is heard, and we're working together on some initiative together. And I was thinking, definitely not, because I don't have the patience. Sometimes I don't have this, I don't have that, and you don't have this and you don't have that. And so these were my initial thoughts when I entered into this session. But at the end of the session, I was thinking of all the ways that I've seen this happen and did not realize that's what was going on, but also ways that this is twofold. It's not just supporting youth, this is supporting adults. And so, to get into what is a youth adult partnership, it has five components. And someone just asked me today, why is it not a comma? Instead of having the letters A, B, C, D, E, why is there not just a comma to include that, to recognize that this is one full sentence? And I said, and I had to tell them that because when you are going to participate or create a youth adult partnership, each one of these pieces has to be included. Whereas when you're writing a sentence, or when you think of a sentence that simply has a comma, there are pieces that can be either or. But in this case, a youth adult partnership, everything must be included. And so there's a lot of pre work that you have to do coming into an initiative that will be a youth adult partnership in facilitating this for others. The first is that multiple youth and adults deliberating and multiple youth and multiple adults are deliberating and acting together. So multiple does not mean just one or two. We're talking, I would say, at least three to five at minimum youth, three to five at minimum adults coming together. And of course, the larger that number becomes, the more communication channels are taking place as well. Not a problem. At the core of it, you do know that the for the premise of this partnership, you have to recognize that multiple youth, multiple adults must come together to in order to act. Now, in this part B, a collective democratic fashion. I loved this because when I tell you in a few moments, when we get to my partnership that I oversaw, the democratic piece became core. For me, it was about them voting. So that was the way that I made ensured that their voice kind of was heard, that everybody had to take a vote on any decision. With you may choose that democratic means something different. But for me, mine was that they voted on the decisions that were presented and forward for everyone. Over a sustained period of time, I will tell you that I think that this could last for at least a month or longer. Some even would say that 2 months or 3 months, all the way up to a year. It at the very minimum, I would say, as long as it's at least I'll say 2 months if I really had to put a definition on it at the minimum. Or maybe it's because I'm biased because that's what I did. But at least 2 months, because we think about when we enter into a new system and we're establishing a new routine, it takes us a little while to even get comfortable with this new routine. So saying a week or 2 weeks just isn't going to cut it. You need more time to allow a rhythm to take place on a consistent basis through shared work. So point D is these people are working for towards a common cause. They have each person knows why they are there, and they're not before they may break up into smaller subgroups, but they all have a common cause that they're working towards a shared process, a shared work or conclusion or product. And finally, the ways that they find because we talk about this sense of agency and the ways that that can be supported is the final product has to promote social justice or strengthen an organization to and or to affirmatively address a community issue. So it could still be very local, but social justice, I think the reason why they included that is to allow a group of people to support them coming together for a shared cause. They don't have to all agree, but they have a shared cause as to lending their voices to an issue. And we, again, thinking about that need for voice and needing to kind of justify your stance, but also hear someone else's as well, with the goal of strengthening yourself, an issue, a policy, the community, all of that. It can be what the ways of the premise for a youth adult partnership. And so I really fell in love with the opportunity surrounding this framework of what all needed to be included, what made the cut, so to speak, to allow for this to be successful. And I want to point out, because many of us, when we may enter into an organization or I'll say entering into an organization or in school, especially, we'll talk about mentor programs or a volunteer opportunity that still allows you to participate in a community effort. A youth adult partnership is different from that. It is not a youth being mentored by adults. It is not a volunteer opportunity where you show up twice a week, you serve a few hours, you may participate in a food drive, you might pass out flyers based on an initiative from a program that's going to be introduced. This is not that. This is this shared engagement for both youth participants and adults to come together based on an issue, lend their voices, and be developed. Because adults, it requires patience. Youth, it requires voice. And based on the premise, this framework that allows for voice, that requires everybody to participate, you'll be surprised by the outcomes for both youth and development. I mean, for both youth and adults that I found, and I'm sure you would be able to find too if you decided to implement this strategy. So, with that, I'm going to pause, look in the chat, and see if there are any comments for me. Are there any questions you'd like me to address? Feel free to put them in the chat. And right now, as I'm looking, I'm going to pause and just kind of take in any of your feedback. Or you could just tell me that you're still with me. I'd appreciate that. I don't want to lose anyone. All right. All right. I am going to keep us going. I'm going to assume. Oh, I'll give another moment just in case there are any comments that come through, and I'll continue working. Oh, okay, okay. So I do have a question here. Thank you for that. Okay, so what are some recommendations for making a young person's leadership work in a group of adults? Oh, yeah, okay. This was the fun part, let me tell you. I will go. Thank you for sharing that you're still here with me. But I will answer this question, but just know that I'll get to that as I explain what happened in our partnership. But what are some recommendations immediately just to answer this question? Um, make sure that everybody has to be heard. So it can as simply be when a decision needs to be made, and no one wants to like put the raise their hand or feel like they are bullying someone else. I would recommend having everyone have like a, post-it note, and on their post-it note, they everybody has like a stack of post-it notes, and throughout your working session for that day, and when the decision needs to be made, go on and have everybody write down what their solution is, what their answer would be, what their insight is, and then bring that forward. And so that is what I would say, is make sure that everybody has that to at least contribute, and then have someone be able to read those in real time. And so even if no one wants to raise their hand when they're voting, because again, everybody has to participate, you can't leave anybody out. That's the premise of this, that everybody's voice is heard, even when they don't want to. So when you have someone that's quiet, this allows them to still contribute to the conversation and still not feel outed or bullied in some kind of way. So that would be one thing, but I'll continue to get to that answer. Okay. So I see the question, a young person's leadership, and then I have the question of making an adult person's leadership work. The adult, by voting, sometimes within my partnership that I hosted, their decision that they put forward, because it requires a vote, they may have been outvoted. And so they're not going to storm out of the room. They're not going to, curse and get upset, because they recognize the fairness of the process. And I think if you're dealing with the group, because you have to learn who your group participants are, if they're not comfortable speaking out initially, then using that anonymous voting system, it allows them to know that even if their decision was not heard, they still were outvoted, and they have to deal with it and move forward, and still just know that there was a better idea on the table. And so that was something that my participants recognized, that when they were outvoted, my adults, when they were outvoted, I'll tell you that the youth and adult numbers were the same. But so if an adult felt like they were outvoted, they recognized the fairness of this process, and then it made them humble themselves to say, maybe my idea wasn't the best. And that's the beauty of it. One more question I see. What activities can we do to integrate the ideas of both groups? Because looks like no one of them what to yield. But because looks like that was no one of what to yield. I don't think I fully follow this question. What activities can we do to integrate ideas of both groups? Okay, so I think what you're saying is, in what ways can both adults and youth kind of put their ideas forward? If that is what you're saying, Miguel, please say yes for me, because looks like that was what may have been a limitation. If you'll just say yes, I can answer that. What activities can we do? If you're asking me what ways can you get both a youth and adult to give their idea, to both to feel comfortable to speak up, and if that's what you're looking for me to answer, then just tell me yes. Okay. So with what I did, or one of the things that we did, we had them, the sticky note. Again, when you're dealing with quiet, introverted individuals that don't immediately want to speak up, but they want to participate, you know that they have something to contribute. There's something of interest there that they have value they can contribute to. And so providing, maybe you got to get a little out of the box in making sure that everyone is heard. So I think maybe putting in the way that we would maybe put people in small groups. So instead of in a larger class, you then break people up into small groups and have like a list. You have to be prepared, but have a list of questions of ideas that need to be discussed. You can maybe put them into smaller groups and allow them to kind of have a little bit of group think, but still opportunity to say, hey, I want all ideas on the table. So you kind of preface it with that. Everybody put all your ideas on the table. Nothing, no, don't leave anything out. And so nothing is, so you got to tell them nothing is silly. Add everything out here that you want to be considered for this policy, for this program, for this community engagement opportunity. Tell me right now. And you have somebody writing, or you can even pass the sheet around where everybody has to put at least one thing down. About, well, the way that we did it, we had someone put it on the board. So we had like a person that was not participating. She was actually my PhD student. She actually wrote on the board all the ideas that did come up. And so kind of that same thing. I don't want anyone to not have their idea heard. Don't feel like it's too silly or anything. I want you to make sure that you tell me it needs to go on the board. And you could even, again, using that sticky note really was successful for us, or could be successful. And so everyone, you'll have your people that want to say it out loud. You'll have your people that are just like, maybe what we did a little, I've seen it a little bit funny where they say, throw your idea at me, and they'll kind of ball up their sticky note, and everybody loves throwing it at the teacher. That's what they did in this case. And so everybody laughed and was interested in what was on the sheet. And so just kind of getting outside the box so that you can lessen the tension that may take place because everyone's scared to kind of speak up. And so that happened with adults too, because they didn't feel that their idea is, when they're not as familiar with something. In this case, in my case, they did not know the community, and so they could not speak to and give their ideas in the way that the youth did. So that became this power imbalance that balanced the power. They had to lean on one another. So I do hope that that answers your question, but I'll keep going because I have more that may help you. All right, I think I stopped sharing. Let me go back. Or maybe I am sharing. It says okay. I know I'm sharing now. Okay. Different from mentorship, different from volunteer opportunity. Again, this is not someone saying, we're going to meet once a week and I want to take you out to lunch and tell me about what the problem is that's going on in school. Tell me about the problems that's going on at home. This is not that. This is a group of people mixed with adults and youth coming together to say, let's, for me, I'll say battle it out, but it's not that. It's, let's come to an opportunity where we may even have shared differences, but from that we're able to contribute to a conversation and sharpen this idea that contributes to a community, a program initiative that could be based in that could support our organization, creating better culture amongst our people. Because when people feel comfortable, they'll talk to you a little bit more, they'll share, they'll open up a little bit more, they'll attend a little bit more, and that's what we want. So my charge, for me, it was recreation and sport for development. But at the core of this, it's about relationships. We want people to feel comfortable being with one another. And one of the best ways that we develop relationships is through conflict, healthy conflict. We may disagree. We may have to come to another side, think about it from a different perspective. We may connect with someone because we appreciate the way that they tell the story, that they speak, the way that they think. We're establishing relationships, ultimately towards a shared goal. We may not always agree, But we know that our conflict, our disconnect, I won't say our disconnect, our conflict, our discussions are sharpening an idea that's supporting us, making us better. It's challenging us to think differently, but also someone else to think differently as well. Because even if your decision is not the final decision that is gone into play, you know that you made someone else think in a different way, which is what we value in organizations when we're wanting people to grow. We need this. And for me, the solution was youth adult partnerships. So for me, again, when we are having a useful approach for educating aspiring professionals or professionals in the industry that already have experience, that are now, when I remember when I mentioned that cycle where they're having to go back to youth and maybe develop them in a new way, and think about when, so an adult may have to onboard a new employee, and so they understand the troubles that they went through, and so they're having to educate them in a new way. In the so it's kind of the same interplay with the youth adult partnership, where someone has a new strength, or this person has this strength, and you combine them and see how you can better sharpen an idea that contributes to an to a program, to that policy, to the community. So, different from service learning. And so this is what a lot of students, for me, in as as a former professor, well, I'm always going to be a professor, but as a professor in higher ed, we're often thinking about service learning in terms of, you may do this end of the year project, you present that where you are supporting someone in some fashion, you put together some type of program and you want to implement that program. This is different. In this case, you are working with that community in order to put the program on, to collectively. And in this case, we're talking about youth and adults working together. So for my project, I had college students that were aged 19 to 23, and high school students, 14 to 18, but they were equal in number, 9 and 9. And the college students would travel to the high school during in school time, that as a PE course. And so they would travel and meet twice a week for 2 months, and that meeting would last about an hour. At the conclusion of that, they put together what was called Ultimate Family Field Day, and that included a fun run, field games, bounce house, snow cones, etc. So, excuse me, as you can imagine, this costs money that college students, high school students generally do not have in their back pocket. This requires speaking to vendors that have to sell them or rent them the bounce house. They have to rent snow cones, get the supplies for the snow cones, field games, anything from human-sized checkers or chess, a fun run, which is where they ran a mile, or they set it up to where everybody could run a mile, and they threw. I think they threw chalk at people. That sounded fun at the time. And so they made a mess at the park, but they loved it. So this is what they planned for on that day. And I apologize that I don't have pictures in here to show you what they did. That is my fault. Um, but for me, outside of knowing that I wanted them to have this unique experience, because no one ever approached me about doing something like this and having college students come down that were already working within the industry, in this case, the recreation industry, to kind of plan this community based event. And so for me, what I did is I wanted to kind of manage this or measure this to see how does it work, how successful is it for others that may adopt this in their industry as well, because it's surely not exclusive to the recreation and sport industry. But as a professional and now working in the hospital system, I see this of value within our organizations that we're thinking about community development and the ways that we can better support our community in developing each other as project managers, as business analysts, as HR professionals. And so thinking about ways that we measure, this is the way that I measured this project because I knew that this needed to be supported or recognized outside. This rubric has 20 questions and is based on a 5-point rating scale. And then the last piece is not applicable, meaning you didn't see that being measured at all, and you just write that note. Um, the dimensions are authentic decision making, natural mentoring, reciprocity, and community connectedness. So, authentic decision making is everybody's at the table having an opportunity to contribute their ideas and be a part of the final decision. Natural mentoring is kind of this organic nature for conversation. How does the conversation flow, whether they're in the larger group or in a smaller group? In what ways do people learn from one another? Reciprocity, do I respect you? In what ways does that respect look like? Community connectedness, in what ways are we contributing to the community? So this is where that core framework of where the policy, I mean the youth adult partnership framework comes from. Community, that policy or community engagement effort, all of that comes into consideration as to why it now will be measured. And so this is what the actual rubric looks like. And this came from a professor or a group of professors at University of Michigan in Michigan, and in the US. And they scored this, they validated this rubric and noted that this is what ultimately allows you to track the success or where you could be, areas of improvement as you move forward in your as you move forward in your partnership. And this is a sample of what one of those pages looks like, that's measuring, in this case, community connectedness, where youth are engaged in communities and there are questions of youth develop a sense of community through program involvement. And then they give you a description of 1, 3, 5, and then the rater has to write in, and there's an opportunity for notes where they can write this in. And so, this rubric, after every engagement for my project, my researcher, she would fill this out. And then we would meet because I didn't attend all meetings. Then we would meet and we'd go through her notes because she also kept a rubric. I mean, she also kept a journal. We would go through her notes and kind of validate and make sure that each one of these was rated. We were consistent in our understanding of how this was being scored. And so that's how we rated this project. And so this was completed after each meeting, in terms of she wrote in her journal after each meeting, and then after the event, and then we would meet each time as well. And so her role while attending each meeting was observer participant. So she would answer questions, she would write on the board when they needed a neutral person, but she was only there to observe. She would not insert her ideas or say, "Oh, I think that's a good idea. Oh, that's a good idea." No, she was only there to kind of document what was going on. So it's kind of like she was a little bit of a creeper, where she would sit in the back and like take notes a little bit. That was what she did, because her job was just to see that the facilitation was taking place in the room, however it was taking place in the room. Now, this, I'm not going to go through, I'm just going to kind of breeze through these next few slides, but just to kind of give you a visual as each one is documented, because we did document just dimension 1, dimension 2, based on the questions of where each one lined up. Dimension 3, reciprocity. You'll see these variations based on the score. Dimension 4, community connectedness, what happened there. And so we would talk about this at the of course at the end of the project, where when we did see where everything lined up. So when we said that it was a 1 to 5, now we see it on the screen of where does that actually line up. So, but at the overall, from that project, this is where all the dimensions are observed collectively. So dimension 1, 2, 3, 4, based on their color, this is what it looked like. And so we had some up moments, some down moments, some up moments, and we finished off on a high moment. But a few things that what was so interesting is when we see that, when we had to discuss why is there a down moment here, because it's kind of consistent with each dimension. Why is there a down moment? And we were able to go back to her journal and note that, down moment when, yeah, we're working together, everybody's excited, but now we see that, that youth adult, that power relationship comes into play, where adults, where everybody assumes their natural order. Adults feel like they should be taking the lead, they can't depend on the youth. And so we see this drop. And in my case, it was adults. In another case where youth may have the upper advantage, we may see it be the youth. But either way, it's great to document that and see what's going on and then refer back to what happened. And then we have a second drop around, you can't, oh, okay, we have a second drop around here, and we went back to that, and it was like, what happened? And so everybody, so we noted that that was spring break. So we were in that March time period, and they were just ready to kind of, we check out when it's about time to have a break. We kind of check out, and that's exactly what happened here. They didn't really, they were just ready to get the time over with, be in class just to get the time over with. And so that we noted that as well. And so it was a funny point, but we recognized that documenting this was really cool to recognize. And then we finish off after spring break, or coming back from spring break, we see this major intensive. We got to get on it, make sure that we're finishing strong because our name is on the line. And so that, I just really want to show this overall picture of what happened during our 8 weeks together. Now I'll stop there and just kind of see if there are any questions that I might have missed. Okay, okay. All right. I don't see anything in the chat. I'll just give a few more seconds, and then I'll jump back in and finish us out. Okay. All right. I'm going to jump back in now. So to conclude, we really have valued seeing the documentation of this partnership. Of, we thought, we felt like we stayed true to what a youth adult partnership would require, because each day we're observing and referring back to this rubric based on these questions to see, did this occur? And we have to be honest about that. We noticed that all dimensions were unequally observed throughout planning. And some moments in the beginning, we didn't see community connectedness being very high, but we do see it at the end. We just recognize that we didn't feel like all of it was relevant the entire time, because there's also this chance to kind of grow and see what does take place over the course of your project as well. Um, but ultimately, our biggest and finest conclusion was that a youth adult partnership is a fantastic framework for future organizational development partnerships. So as you enter into your organizations in the future, or where you currently are, and you're thinking about ways to develop, whether it be you're thinking about ways to support the members of your community, that the that may be in your community because they grow up to be adults, or the adults within your organizations, for them to develop a sense of agency, to be confident, to contribute, to feel heard, to develop voice. This was also valuable to them as well. And I did not, this presentation wasn't about what was the feedback we received from our participants, but I will go on and kind of share that the adults, once going through the end, they noted themselves, because we also hosted a focus group before and after as well. And we asked, what are some things that what are some things that you've learned? And they talked about patience. They talked about respecting, though, the strength of others that may not be the same age. And so recognizing when someone has a strength, just because you are older does not automatically lend to you being the most wisest person in the room. And so knowing that, it also is a humbling factor that allows you to propel moving forward, because you're now more receptive to ideas, you're able to better engage, and people like that because a leader isn't the one that's always the smartest in the room. Some limitations, we were the one thing that we some things that we thought about, we wanted to increase the duration of the meeting. So instead of 1 hour, we wanted to be longer, or it could be longer. Increase weeks for planning. So instead of just 2 months, allow 3 months or 4 months, because as you can imagine, when you bring a fresh group of people together and it's time to start making decisions, they're still filling each other out, they're trying to learn who they are. And so they couldn't make decisions early on because everyone's being nice. What do you think? What do you think? But when the time does hit, we also see that there's a sense of urgency. It's time to finally make those final decisions. And then the question of, should this be after school or during school? Like, we did it during school and we felt that that supported our retention, because the college students, they're having to travel during this time. Would we lose people if we did this after school? Don't know, but that's an opportunity. And then we said that we wanted to pressure the group to pick the event even sooner. And so that was based on feedback that we received. Everyone's trying to be kind, and instead of making decisions collectively, it delayed the process of finally being for them to finally get their feet upon them so that they can plan the event. Some other ideas that we said, in this case, we only hosted like high school students and college students. What would it be like if we had adults that were not in school, that were working in the industry, that had maybe 5 years of experience? How does that change the conversation? Or assess youth and adult perceptions throughout the project as well, because in this case, we only allowed my PhD student to rate what was going on. In the future, we said, no, we want to get their perceptions of what's going on throughout the process. What are they thinking? How do they feel that they were heard? So I must ask, when does development end? And what is your role in developing within your organization? And that's my presentation. So I will return back to the slide for any questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And first, let me say thank you for inviting me to present on today. Um, and I hope that you all gained something, a consideration that that may have made you think about something differently, or engaging with someone differently, because we all are pressed with our own development, and then at some point someone else's. Any questions for me or comments?
Okay, doctor, we're waiting for some questions or
Okay.
or comments. Let's wait some seconds. There's a question of an unknown user, but it's pretty similar to the previous question, so there's no problem of sharing the question. Okay, there it is.
Of how you can young and positive ambitious worker, maybe in a constant flow state, can deal with the older, more experienced, and maybe closed-minded bosses? Oh, this is a lot. Okay, here we go. Let me give me a second. Um, any thoughts of how can young and positive ambitious, maybe in a constant flow state, can deal with older, more? Oh, okay. Great question. So Outside of this is a really good question because this is every day. We all, may be pressed of dealing with this in our as especially as adults that may be or young adults now working alongside someone that is more seasoned. And in that case, it sometimes I think that it may be a season where you just have to kind of take a back seat and allow that person to move forward and allow you to just kind of pick up what you like and what you don't like from how they're leading, because it's very different from when you enter into this chamber where your voice has to be heard. You have to be considered an equal participant. In such case, I think it would be good for you to think of that challenging question that makes them think differently, that where you can bring proof or evidence that this would be valuable to said group of people that they may be overlooking, because that's what happens when we think about our closed mind bosses or individuals that are more seasoned. They're coming from a state from what worked in the past, and now you're able to come in with maybe fresher ideas that have been tried and tested that they don't even know about. And so change can be difficult, but when you're still able to challenge, you're doing your part. Because for me, when you are even asking that challenging question, you're planting a seed, and it's requiring them to go somewhere else and process that. Even if not in that moment, they're going somewhere else and they're having to think about what you said. That is what, so still challenge, still ask the question, because even if they don't make it seem like you asked a good question, they're thinking about it, and they're thinking about it later because they may be challenged later. It was a great shot. Okay, thank you for that. We need to develop that skill. We definitely, this was so interesting to me, and I really wanted to hear, of course, from my youth, but also as a lot of the youth adult partnership is focused on youth development. In this case, we're saying what we find out is that adults were developed as well. They were challenged. They had to grow patience. They had to take a back seat and humble themselves when their decision, their ideas were not the best, and so they were sharpened by someone else, and that was the beauty of that. Sometimes they've absolutely both voices matter, and so even this became really critical for me to understand it and make sure I'm respecting my engagements with everybody, because when you know that you're constantly taking in information, you're constantly understanding or interpreting how that makes sense for you, you know that everybody else is, and you're growing and being sharpened by that. A- Adults also face these fears. Oh, for sure. We're still, no matter how old you are, we are in development. We're constantly growing. We're constantly having to make sense of situations, and our ideas change. What we thought before may not be how we feel now, and that's okay as long as we're still growing and know that we're being challenged. The conflict as an absolute conflict, the construction of this framework from the difference more like a diversity. It could be. All of that comes into play. Background experiences that makes us who we are, and so when you bring these different experiences to the table, it requires someone else to rethink what they thought was real, true about someone else. And thanks for the context. Oh, love it. So glad that you got something from this. Absolutely. Thank you all for the great questions. This is how we are sharpened. You challenging me, my answer, you're still making sense of that, or even thinking, how can you apply that? That's when we grow. So constantly be thinking of ways or recognize the ways that you're growing, because we're doing it every single day. And that is when we think about trends in organizations, we're also thinking about ways that we're growing, not just the organization and maybe in finance and revenue, but also our people. Yes, speak up. And even if you feel like there's a pause after when you speak up, that's okay because people are thinking about what you said. Allow that awkward, uncomfortable space. Nothing wrong with that. As you keep speaking up, as you keep making sense of what was being said and interpreting that in your mind, the sharper you become to better engage in future conversations. It is not easy. It is scary, but this is what sets us apart and allows us to grow and be healthier, stronger in our thoughts and our minds.
Perfect. We want to thank Dr. Taryn for the content shared at this lecture. Doctor, UPAEP appreciates your valuable participation, hoping to count on your presence again on future occasions.
Absolutely. Thank you again so much for having me.
Anything else you want to say to this farewell?
No, keep growing. It is not fun. It is not easy, but it is required. And so one of those ways is by think processing how you're changing your thoughts because that's the beauty of our life.
Thank you very much, Doctor, and have a nice evening.
You as well. Have a good one, everyone.
Thank you very much. Perfecto. Ya para dar paso al último evento del foro, la culminación en la tarde se prosigue con el panel Agentes de Cambio comprometidos con el bien común. En unos segundos regresamos.